just make sure everything is working. Alright.
We are live, we must be fast as a coursing river.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Tomb Raider.
Yeah. I don't know why I expected you to say goblins versus Strahd then.
No, that was last night. And will be
Yes.
again because we didn't quite finish.
I almost died. I know that's not relevant to this stream, but there's just sort of like, I almost made it without getting to death saves through the campaign.
Oh, on the live TikTok monitor thing, you can change the category to chat and interview. So
Yeah, let's go with that. We are chatting.
yeah. And this week we will be discussing the next 3 stories in The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Boscombe Valley Mystery, The 5 Orange Pips, and The Man with the Twisted Lip.
Yes, and there's and while we were talking, there was a small bit of disagreement between us. Nothing major, but as to each of us felt that there was a bit of a non-story in this week, and we disagreed on which one it was.
Yeah. But before...
We will get to that.
Although, neither of them were the Boscombe Valley Mystery, which will be the first one we talk about.
Yes, it's also strangely the one I remember least about at first.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty standard Sherlock Holmes mystery, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I say that having read about, like, 5 of them total.
Well, 8 total now, because we did read it and 2 others as well.
Yeah.
So we are at 8. This book contains 12, so we haven't quite read 3 books worth yet.
Yeah. The audio all seems to be working pretty well.
That's good.
Okay. So, the Boscombe Valley Mystery. I thought this was pretty standard Sherlock Holmes mystery, as I understand them to be at this point.
Yeah.
Although, like, there's usually a twist at the end. Like, and
yeah,
I didn't see this one coming, I gotta say.
Yeah, I was like, for the most part, I did see sort of where this was going. Well, if X is innocent, it has to be Y because there's no one else really involved with it.
Yeah, and well,
but the bit that sort of followed, well, yes, it's Y, but here is variable V.
Although
I didn't actually need to choose variables initial for that.
Yeah, it does have one of my favourite exchanges of dialogue because Lestrade comes back.
Yes.
Now,
yes, we get Lestrade, the most famous of Sherlock's detectives, returns.
Though in the audiobook I've been listening through while reading the book, Stephen Fry pronounces it Lestrade, which sounds wrong to me.
Yeah, because every adaptation calls him Lestrade.
Yeah. Whichever one you prefer is valid. It's yeah.
Yeah.
So, Watson, shall we do our usual recap of the story?
Yes. Wait, I'm Watson.
I started by saying Watson as in the beginning of the story, and then thought, no, I didn't introduce the concept yet.
Yeah. But yes, we would go with our normal line of we start as always in 221B Baker Street, but we don't.
No, we start in... Well, we don't actually know where Watson lives. It's not important.
We start in Watson's dining room, where he and Mary are seated for breakfast, and he gets a telegram from Sherlock Holmes.
and it says, "Have you a couple of days to spare? Have just been wired from the west of England in connection with Boscombe Valley tragedy. Shall be glad if you will come with me. Air and scenery, perfect. Leave Paddington by the 11:15."
Yes, and evidently Mary is getting a bit tired of Watson because she's perfectly happy with this very sudden change of plans and actively encourages him to go.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and is just sort of like he has what, an hour? Is it till that?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's yes. She makes
Oh,
reference.
half an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, I must pack at once, for I have only half an hour. Yes. Oh, Sherlock, you really need to get your timings better.
Yeah.
But given that he's a former soldier who sort of had to pack up quickly, he is packed and within a cab. And unless, well, I'm guessing the only half an hour is half an hour until he needs to leave.
Yeah.
Rather than half an hour till it's going. So he's packed out and in a cab within the 30 minutes, and arrives, and Holmes is pacing up and down the platform.
I mean, as a military man, Watson is used to moving about a bit and packing quickly and travelling lightly. So,
and everything being in exactly where he left it
yeah.
as well. So yeah, there is got a. They mentioned someone is this. Oh, and Struve would do your work for you. So it sounds like Watson has someone else working at the practice he is in.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, from the way that Watson talks, it almost suggests that he is in charge of the practice, but we have no evidence of that.
No.
Other than what
Watson's professional engagements are very much glossed over in the text.
Yeah, apart from one where it's the most interesting case of his own, where he spends the day attending to the patient, and then gets to the much more interesting case with Sherlock. I believe that was the case of the Red-Headed League.
Yeah.
Where that occurred. So Holmes is happy to see Watson, and tells him to it's good of you to come. Now, if you would hold the corner seats, I will go and get the tickets. So at this point, a moment where Holmes isn't entirely confident on an outcome, based upon the data he has available, which he sent a note to Watson, and he knows Watson likes his work. He didn't buy a ticket beforehand, going, "Oh yes, of course Watson will come."
Yeah.
So it's a moment where the always certain Sherlock is not actually always certain. Yes, but he then inquires as to whether Watson knows anything about the case, and Watson admits, in a time where we didn't have much entertainment and the reading of the daily papers is is sort of a fundamental part of life, that he hasn't seen a paper in some days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, but Sherlock then points out that the London press hasn't given very few full accounts.
Yeah. Mind you, today's equivalent would probably be I haven't logged onto any social media in several days.
And though admittedly today that would be followed with "for the best," most likely.
Yeah. We're in hell.
Yes. Yes. Come for the Sherlock Holmes, stay for the cutting social commentary.
So, it was said to be in the West Country, wasn't it?
Yes. So around my neck of the woods, Herefordshire is where it is. According to the text.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, he hasn't. So Sherlock is not certain that what has occurred. He's not certain that there's been a murder,
yes.
though. That is what people seem to be assuming.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes. There is. Well, he's also. He has been engaged by. Oh, flipping. Apologies. A YouTube video I have had on pause for about half a month suddenly started playing.
yeah, that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Holmes is talking about an. I guess in this case, however, they established a very serious case against the son of the murdered man. The time. It is a murder, then, says Watson. Well, it is conjectured to be. I shall take nothing for granted until I have the opportunity of looking personally into it. It's
And yeah, that's a thing Sherlock repeats in his processes is don't make any assumptions until you have data to go on.
yes, and not second-hand data like police reports or the newspaper, but first-hand data, i.e.,
Primary sources.
i.e., data you've gathered yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because as there is a line later on that will show, even his opinion of the highest in Scotland Yard is really quite low.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, Sherlock
yeah.
apprises Watson of the situation. Uh, I think John Turner is the dad, isn't he?
Yes, Mr. John Turner, who made his money in Australia and returned some. Yes, he is the largest land proprietor in Boscombe Valley, so he's a landowner.
Yeah.
Mr.
And
John Turner, who made
Charles.
his money in Australia.
Yeah. And the victim was a Mr. Charles McCarthy,
Uh,
who was also an
I think it,
ex-Australian.
there's
No, 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 no.
John Turner's the victim because it's his son who's suspected of it, and Charles McCarthy is his tenant, who is also there.
I have
So
gone through this story 3 times.
I'll be honest, names are not my strong point, and I've only got it because I am looking at the text right now.
Yeah, I've taken
So,
to doing that.
yeah, uh, no, you were correct. McCarthy is the victim.
Yeah, and
McCarthy had one son, a lad of 18, and Turner had an only daughter. Uh, yes, yes, of course. I'm confusing myself as to which is the landlord and which is the tenant.
yeah.
Yeah, those.
Uh,
That was me. Ollie had it right.
yep. So,
Right. Yeah. But is the long and the short on the case on sort of background is that there are two Australians who have returned to the home country, who have been close and have generally avoided the company of, pardon me, of the local sort of society, and the neighbouring English families, and have led retired lives. Though both the McCarthys were fond of sport and was frequently seen at the race meetings of the neighbourhood. And of course, because what is at the time essentially a possible scandal involving rich people, they have to mention that McCarthy was able to keep two servants. This is the poorer of the two, and that Turner had a considerable household of some half a dozen at the least.
I see.
Yeah, and that's sort of the background. That McCarthy has a son, Turner has a daughter. Uh, McCarthy and Turner seemingly knew each other in Australia and have been keeping close company since they have both returned.
The two
And
McCarthys were heard arguing, and then one of them was found dead, which seems like a pretty open and shut case.
yes, with the gamekeeper, a witness who saw his name is not mentioned. The other was William Crowder. A witness called William Crowder, a gamekeeper in the employ of Mr. Turner, saw Mr. McCarthy walking alone, and then a few minutes later, his son came along with a gun under his arm, going the same way. And yeah, the two McCarthys were seen sometime after by another person.
It's the most incriminating possible series of events. So obviously he's innocent.
Yeah. Yeah, they were having a violent quarrel, according to a girl of 14, in the wooded area near the Boscombe pool, which is a thickly wooded area apparently in the valley.
Yeah.
the urge to affect a Welsh accent then was surprising me. It surprised me out of nowhere. She heard Mr. McCarthy the elder using very strong language to his son, and she saw the latter raise up his hand as if to strike his father. She then ran away and told her mother, when she reached home, that she had left the two McCarthys quarrelling near the pool, and she was afraid they were going to fight. She had hardly said the words when the young Mr. McCarthy came running up to the lodge and said that he had found his father dead in the woods, and to ask for the help of the lodge keeper. He was much excited without his gun or his hat, and his right hand and sleeve were observed to be stained with fresh blood. On following him, they found the dead body stretched out upon the grass besides the pool. The head had been beaten in by repeated blows by some heavy, blunt object. Injuries were such as might very well have been inflicted by the butt end of a gun, which was found, with the sons being found lying in the grass within a few paces. The most obvious sort of thing. Under these circumstances, the young man was instantly arrested, and the verdict of willful murder having been returned at the inquest on Tuesday. It was on Wednesday brought before the magistrate, and who referred the case to the next ANSIS, or ASSIS? I can't remember that word. These are the main facts of the case that came before the coroner and the police court. Yes.
Yeah.
And as Ollie said, could hardly imagine a more damning case.
Yeah.
And then they go into a bit that about the nature of circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, and Sherlock says circumstantial evidence is a funny thing. Just looking at it from a different angle can make it seem like it's pointing just as strongly somewhere else. And he points out that many people have been wrongfully hanged, and
yeah.
Let's see. He gives an account that was, I think, in the papers, wasn't it? It was some sort of written statement that was made.
Yeah, seems to be a bit. However, the case looks seemingly
Okay, you know what? I don't want us to make a habit of this, but should I just read it out and we'll comment as we go? It's public domain.
We could get through it. The the daughter of the landowner, Miss Turner. I don't believe her name is Elizabeth, but there's nothing new under the sun, so it could be. He has retained Lestrade because she believes that the young McCarthy is innocent. And Lestrade looked at it, was puzzled, and went and referred the case to Sherlock.
Yeah.
And that is, yeah. And
Yeah.
Sherlock comments that there's nothing more deceptive than an obvious fact.
Yeah.
Laughing. Besides, we may chance to hit upon some other obvious facts that may have been by no means obvious to Mr. Lestrade. You know me too well to think that I am boasting when I say that I shall either confirm or destroy his theory by means which he is quite incapable of employing or even understanding.
Yeah. And then he shows off a little bit by telling John I very clearly perceive that in your bedroom the window is upon the right hand side, and yet I question whether Mr. Lestrade would have noticed even so self evident a thing as that. And he doesn't even let Watson get out the
How
surprise.
Did you know that?
Yeah, he's like, how on earth? And he just goes, my dear fellow, I know you well. And he's like, mate, you're a military man. You shave every morning. The left side of your face is a mess. That can only mean the lighting is on the right.
Yeah. And there's this like, and in this season you shave by the sunlight. It's like, mate, I know you. We lived together.
Yeah.
You don't think I recognize the eccentricities of your shaving?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, I only quote this as a trivial example of observation and inference. Therein lies my miniere. And it's just possible that it may be of some service in the investigation which lies before us.
Yeah. And it turns out that upon being taken, he wasn't surprised to hear why, which Watson takes as a confession. To which the text says, "It was a confession," I ejaculated.
Yeah.
Ding.
No, for it was followed by a protestation of innocence. It's just sort of like, the humour of how language changes sometimes.
Yeah. And Holmes says that it's that willingness to acknowledge that he wasn't surprised that leads him to believe he's innocent, because a person who had definitely done it would act surprised.
Yeah, and would quite probably overact if it was a crime of passion, or an unplanned crime, because crime of passion generally has a connotation of there is a sexual or romantic element to it, which I don't think Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was going to put incest into the stories of Sherlock Holmes.
No, I don't think he would have. And this is followed by...
This is where the story in the next week is going to prove us wrong. Because it happened when I mentioned about the drugs.
Yep. This is followed by Watson remarking, many men have been hanged on far slighter evidence, to which Holmes replies, so they have, and many men have been wrongfully hanged.
Yeah. Yes, and I do want to just say something on the nature of circumstantial evidence. Is like, if you're like looking at American crime dramas and indeed adaptations of Sherlock as well, if the police regularly only went to arrest people with the level of evidence that you acquire in a crime drama, which is sort of essentially, it is irrefutable that you committed this, there would only be about 5 arrests a year. Most court cases go to trial on circumstantial evidence.
Yeah.
It is just the nature of how evidence works.
Yeah, and, well, how difficult proof of anything is to establish.
And this is in an age where, and this is including the city of London, the most surveillance heavy city in the world.
Yeah. No.
And I know this because I have family in the Met Crime Scene Investigation Service.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So, no, well, I've had no reason really to bring them up before. Or, but yeah, so Sherlock's distrust of circumstantial evidence is like, yes, from looking at it a different way, it could potentially change, but it is also the main way you get convictions.
Yeah.
And is unfortunate, but it's also fortunate that Sherlock is also often able to acquire stronger evidence to the contrary than any circumstantial evidence in support of.
Yeah. Uh,
Though some of his evidence would also probably be called circumstantial.
yeah. So,
Indeed, in the scandal in Bohemia, he basically tried to ask, yes, here's how to discredit evidence, in the how to discredit the letters and photo from the Irene Adler case.
uh, so Watson picks up a newspaper and um, reads up on the actual statement and an interview in which, uh, well, in which I think was it James? It says the coroner and the witness, but basically, the defendant, for lack of a better term, is not forthcoming with information that could potentially help him, which is not a good look. Uh,
Yeah, he states that he'd only come back on that on the day of the murder, and that his father was not aware he was back yet. He had spent the last 3 days in Bristol, or as it is known now to the locals, Brizzle,
ah,
because the Bristolian accent is strange. Strange. Yeah, my brother lives there currently, so
I see.
I should probably stop giving out so much information about my family, even though it's very vague.
Yeah,
But
it's well, which it's natural in conversation, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah,
yes, but so he's got back, and um, he's when his father's out when he gets back, and then his father arrives back and is very promptly walking away. So he follows him, taking his gun. Now he never says why he picked up the gun. Oh, yes, he does. Immediately in the next line. With the intention of visiting the rabbit warren, which is upon the other side. So, hunting.
yeah,
Yes. And he didn't know which way his father was going. And which, from the description of it, his father leaving the yard would suggest a wall of some sort. And if he's then going to collect his gun and the hat, no, it just says gun. It is likely he did not see where his father went. Not impossible, but not likely. And then when he was 100 yards or so from the pool, when he heard the cry of "cooey,"
yeah,
which was the usual signal between his father and himself. He hurried forward and found him standing by the pool. He appeared to be much surprised at seeing me and asked me rather roughly what I was doing there. Conversation ensued, which led to high words and almost to blows, for his father was a man of a very violent temper. Seeing that his passions were becoming ungovernable, the son left and returned towards Haverley Farm. He had gone no more than 150 yards, however, when he heard a hideous outcry behind him, which caused him to run back again. He found his father, a brilliant phrase, I found my father expiring upon the ground.
uh,
with a head injury. He dropped his gun and held him in his arms, but he almost instantly expired. He knelt for a few minutes in shock and then made his way to Mr. Turner's lodgekeeper, his house being the nearest, to ask for help. He saw no one near his father when he returned, and he had no idea how he came by his father's injury. Uh, yeah,
forgot to do that.
he had no. His father wasn't popular, being somewhat cold and forbidding in his manners, but he had no enemies as far as he was aware.
Yeah.
And do you want to do the coroner and witness?
All right.
Call. Which do you want to be?
Um, I'll be the coroner. Did your
Okay.
father make any statement to you before he died?
He mumbled a few words, but I could only catch some allusion to a rat.
What did you understand by that?
I conveyed no meaning. It conveyed no meaning to me. I thought that he was delirious.
What was the point upon which you and your father had this final quarrel?
I should prefer not to answer.
I'm afraid that I must press it.
It is really impossible for me to tell you. I can assure you that had nothing to do with the sad tragedy which followed.
That is for the court to decide. I need not point out that your refusal to answer will prejudice your case considerably in any future proceedings which may arise.
I must still refuse.
I understand the cry of cooee was a common signal between you and your father.
It was.
How was it then that he uttered it before he saw you and before he even knew that you had returned from Bristol?
Do not know.
Did you see nothing which aroused suspicions when you returned on hearing the cry and found your father fatally injured?
Nothing definite.
What do you mean?
I was so disturbed and excited as I rushed out into the open that I could think of nothing except for my father. Yet I have a vague impression that as I ran forward, something lay upon the ground to the left of me. It seemed to me that it was something grey in colour, a coat of some sort, or a plaid, perhaps. When I rose from my father, I looked round for it, but it was gone.
Do you mean that it disappeared before you went for help?
Yes, it was gone.
You cannot say what it was.
No, I had a feeling something was there.
How far from the body?
12 yards or so.
And how far from the edge of the wood?
About the same.
Then if it was removed, it was while you were within 12 yards of it.
Yes, but with my back towards it.
This concluded the examination of the witness.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a good look for the man.
Yeah. Refusing to talk about the reason why he and his father came to harsh words just before the death of his father.
For reasons
Isn't a
that will
great
become
look.
apparent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Watson has slightly good words to say about the coroner in that he did a good job with reason to calling about the discrepancy about the father having signalled to him before seeing him.
Yeah.
Which is just sort of like if Sherlock had said that, it probably would have said he's missed everything else of import, but that he's done better than London, than Scotland Yard to have spotted that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they go, well, not to the scene of the crime, but they disembark, and who should be there except but Inspector Lestrade?
Yeah. And Lestrade is he's ordered a carriage and yeah, and Sherlock then says about that has a little aside about the weather and barometric pressure related to uh, oh, instead of going to the case.
Yeah.
Sorry, words just completely failed me there.
No, it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Sherlock says he's got a case of cigarettes that needs smoking before anything can happen. It seems.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Lestrade is basically you have made. I assume you have made your conclusions for the paper. This case is as plain as a pikestaff, and the more one goes into it, the plainer it becomes. Still, of course, one can't refuse a lady, and such a very positive one too.
Yeah. So the daughter of the names have escaped me. I have gone through this story 3 times and I can't remember which name was which.
Miss Turner, it is.
Yeah.
And at the mention of Miss Turner, she arrives in a carriage. By this point, they're in the hotel. It's not particularly made clear. They just sort of go through, and Holmes makes an off comment of, "I hope the sofa is more comfortable than the usual hotel abomination." And then Miss Turner has arrived, and she is very uh, sort of energetic. I would say excited, give in sort of the meaning they use in this, because they just described the young McCarthy as being excited at his father's cry and injury. So
Yeah.
sort of be the adrenaline rush.
Yeah. Excited
Action.
as in
Yeah.
agitated.
Yes. Holmes describes her as one of the most lovely young women that he has ever seen in his life. So it's just sort of like, remember you're married, Watson. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she has violet eyes, which I can't say I've ever met someone with violet eyes.
No, nor have I.
Yeah. Yes, and she greets Holmes and works out which one of them is Holmes quickly with a woman's quick intuition, as Watson calls it.
Yeah.
And she reassures Sherlock that she knows that James didn't do it. And that she wants Sherlock to start upon his work knowing that too. Never let yourself doubt upon that point. We have known each other since we were little children, and I know his faults as no one else does. But he is too tender-hearted to hurt a fly. Such a charge is absurd to anyone who really knows him.
And, well, Sherlock seems to be in agreement with her and promises to do all he can. And says that it's very probable that they can get him off. Which Lestrade takes exception to, because he thinks Sherlock is giving her false hope.
Yeah. Yeah. It comes up during the conversation that James never did some quarrel with one. She says that she knows. She thinks she knows what the subject of the quarrel with the father was, and that James would not disclose it to the coroner because she was concerned in it. When pressed for those details, she says that the McCarthy men have had disagreements about her. The father was anxious that the son James marry her, and the son seemed to be against it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she says that she has a sister's love for him, basically. And James was against it, she was against it, and her father is also against it. That Mr. McCarthy was the only one in favour of it.
And he was quite insistent.
Yeah. Yeah, and Holmes wants to see her father when he calls upon her tomorrow, and we learn that he is ill, and has taken and recently has got worse.
Yeah, basically
The cause of his
bedridden
illness,
is what we're led to believe.
yeah, sort of like a long-term effect from his work in Virginia, not Virginia, Victoria in Australia. The gold mines, as it is what it was.
Yeah.
As And at this point, we get the feeling that Holmes has basically solved the case already.
As he does.
Yeah,
And well,
yeah,
Watson says of the man, I can't admire his taste if it is indeed a fact he was averse to marriage with so charming a young lady as Miss Turner. And
yeah,
he basically says to Lestrade, if he's innocent, who has done it, and he describes a man, I think left-handed. Left-handed was one of the details. An elderly man, about 60, who is quite tall and left-handed.
yeah,
I seem to think that. I seem to remember that was the um, that was the description.
yeah. About 60, but his constitution has been shattered by his life abroad, and he has been in failing health for some time. The business has been a very bad effect upon him. There's an old friend of McCarthy's, and oh God, I think I'm confusing a section here.
Yeah. Lestrade
Uh,
goes. We've got to the. This is and Lestrade does not want to search the area for a person matching Holmes' description. To
yeah,
which they have my favourite exchange of dialogue in the story, and Lestrade says, "We've got to the deductions and the inferences," said Lestrade, winking at me. "I find it hard enough to tackle the facts, Holmes, without flying away after theories and fancies." To which Sherlock replies, "You're right. You do find it very hard to tackle the facts."
yeah. Yes, there is a bit of time where Holmes, I believe, has gone to see James in the prison, but only he and Lestrade are cleared to go. So Watson has been stuck at the hotel trying to read a book, and it doesn't happen because the mystery is turning in his mind.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
yes, hello.
Ah, I thought I'd lost you there for a second.
Yeah, yeah. Lestrade and Holmes continue arguing for a bit, and
Well, Lestrade basically says that no, the kid did kill his dad, and any insistence that he didn't is, I think he uses the phrase moonshine.
yeah, and Sherlock is like, well, moonshine is brighter thing than fog.
Yeah,
Yes, they go and they do actually go and examine the crime scene, and Sherlock again sort of is tutting. Is just sort of like, oh, you would. So it would be so much clearer if you and your and the other detectives didn't just basically trample over the crime scene.
Yeah.
He he finds uh, unusual boot prints, and that sort of like points out where the gun was. The boot prints that come into the area, leave, and then come back in and leave again. And then it's just sort of like, and there's a difference. It's clearly the same shoe, but here they are tiptoeing to be quiet and stuff like that. And he also deduces that Lestrade had himself had gone over and to the water for some reason, and he asks him about that, and Strad said he's raked for the murder weapon, which, admittedly, yeah, that's standard procedure now. If there's water near the crime scene, is to try and check that for if the weapon was dumped.
Yeah.
So that's not too bad a thing.
I mean,
Yeah, and yeah. Yeah, and Holmes is satisfied with that, and he also finds a jagged stone lying among the moss, which he examines carefully and retains. And for a moment, seeming like every other man who goes out into the woods, ooh, a cool rock.
yeah.
Yeah,
And yeah, the rock is the murder weapon, which he
yeah,
deduces from the grass growing under it. That
yeah.
it hadn't been there more than a few days. There was no sign of a place it had been taken from. There, it corresponds with the injuries, and there was no sign of any other weapon.
And after that, he's asked about the murderer, and is a tall man, left-handed, limps with the right leg, wears thick-soled shooting boots and a grey cloak, smokes Indian cigars, uses a cigar holder, carries a blunt penknife in his pocket. There are several other indications, but they may be enough to aid in our search. And Lestrade is sort of like, I'm skeptical of you, Holmes. Again, I must remain a skeptic. Yeah.
And
Ugh.
well, Sherlock basically says, "Well, I'm going to go back to London by the evening train." And Lestrade says, "What? And leave the case unfinished?" He's like, "What do you mean? I've solved it." But and Lestrade asks who the murderer is, and Holmes says, "The gentleman I just described." And
Too easy.
yeah, Lestrade doesn't want to go looking for him.
Yeah.
So
And Lestrade is just sort of like, I cannot undertake to go about the country looking for a left-handed gentleman with a game leg. Should become the laughing stock of Scotland Yard. Holmes is like, all right, I've given you the chance. Here are your lodgings. Goodbye. I shall drop a line. I drop you a line before I leave. It's just
and
basically,
like to be
it
fair
gives
to
you a
him,
chance.
Sherlock basically handed him the case.
Yeah, Sherlock basically went, here's your chance to actually do a little police work and earn the credit you have received from my work.
Yeah, and
But
and of course it's here where and Arthur Conan Doyle is sufficiently good at plant and payoff that I am certain he starts with the conclusion and works backwards. Because the offhand mention of a rat in the interview now comes back as an important piece of evidence. He wasn't saying anything about a rat, he was making reference to Ballarat, which is a place in Australia.
yes, and the cases and Cooey is also important as well because it is a common. But Cooey is a distinctly Australian cry and one which is used between Australians. There's a strong presumption that the person whom McCarthy expected to meet him at Boscombe Pool was someone who had been in Australia. And at this point, you sort of have to be blind as to who the killer is.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like, there's only been mention of one other Australian. Yeah. Yeah.
And
And, yeah.
so Sherlock
Yeah.
Holmes basically accounts for all of Watson's questions, to which he replies with, "You've drawn a net around this man from which he cannot escape. You've saved an innocent human life as truly as if you'd cut the cord which was hanging him." And then a brilliant sort of, like, almost a literary J cut. He goes, "I see the direction in which all this points. The culprit is Mr. John Turner," cried the hotel waiter, opening the door of our sitting room and ushering in a visitor.
Yes. Yeah. A slow, limping step, bowed shoulders, hard, deep-lined, craggy features, and his enormous limbs showed they possessed of unusual strength of body and of character.
Yeah. And he's answering a summons from Holmes, because of course he's already called the murderer to the room.
Yeah.
So you had my note? Yeah. You said you wished to see me here to avoid a scandal, and he just looks at him. He asks why he wanted to see him, and he just looks at him, and Holmes goes, "Yeah, we know. I know all about McCarthy."
And the old man sank his face into his hand. God help me, but I would not have let the young man come to harm. I give you my word that he would have spoken out if it went against him at the Antis.
Yeah. So basically, John Turner did in McCarthy because he was treating his daughter like a possession, and he bore his son no ill will, but he essentially wanted nothing to do with McCarthy or his family because of how he'd been treated by him.
Yes. An important fact at this point that comes up is how McCarthy has had power over him for a while, because Turner earned his gold not by mining it, but as a highwayman in Australia.
Yeah.
And McCarthy was a guard who got a good look at his face, who wasn't killed on his final run, and essentially has been holding that over him to be able to stay there and that. And while he doesn't bear the son ill will, he does not want the farm or the land essentially going to someone who has the father's blood in their veins. So that's why he opposed the marriage. We also learn why the son opposed the marriage, even though he is deeply in love with Miss Turner. He is married to a barmaid in Bristol.
Oh
yeah. Who he is also now free of that marriage because once the news broke, the woman wrote to him and admitted that they couldn't actually have married under the law because she's got a husband who works the docks in Southport.
This would be a farce if it wasn't a mystery.
Yeah, so so the possibility of he may try and pursue the daughter anyway, but yeah, Alice, I've just spotted is her first name, Alice Turner, but John Turner is he doesn't regret his actions because the argument was about the son. You must marry her, and then the land will be ours, and how great that would be. And then he refers to Alice as a whore, and his father does not, and her father does not take it well, and beats him to death with a rock.
Fair.
Okay. Yeah, this is another one where it feels sympathetic.
Yeah.
And I think part of this was it was spurred on in part because he is also dying. He does not have long. He's got about a month left, and he does not wish to, and sort of like how the elder McCarthy is treating the situation in his own illness. He does not feel that it would be safe for his daughter once he's gone.
Yeah.
So something was going to happen in the before he died.
Yeah.
But
And he does promise that he was never gonna let the McCarthy boy come to harm, and that if it came to it, he would have spoke up in front of the jury and confessed. But he really hoped it wouldn't come to that.
because he wanted to well, essentially die at home rather than die in prison, which
Yeah,
I
again, fair
understand.
enough.
Yeah. Like it doesn't make the situation any better, but you understand the motivation.
Yeah.
And so yeah. But in case sort of like it doesn't uh, go well, and he's not sure he will actually make it to the to the ANSYS. Sherlock it jots down his confession and he signs it, and Sherlock keeps hold of it. And the condition is that Sherlock will produce it at the trial if needed, but if not, uh, it will be kept quiet, essentially, to protect the name and the daughter's reputation, I imagine.
Yeah.
And yeah, and also to protect the daughter's perception of her father and of their life as well. It seems to be. Yeah, and yeah, uh, and Mr. Turner takes a great liking to Holmes and Watson about this. Yes, and it, it says a line that from a lot of other people could be interpreted as a threat from its beginning. And he says, "Farewell, then. Your own deathbeds when they come." Oh,
Yeah.
that's it, dodgy. But the next bit will be easier for the thought of the peace which you have given to mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. And of course,
Yeah, but
it doesn't really come to that anyway, because Sherlock's gathered more than enough evidence to the contrary to acquit him.
yeah. Oh yeah, from the objections. And then old Turner lived for 7 months after our interview, but he is dead. He is now dead, and there is every prospect that the son and daughter may come to live happily together in ignorance of the dark cloud which rests upon their path.
And that's nice.
Yeah, so as it turns out, they might still get married anyway. But the bastard elder McCarthy didn't get his hands on the land. That seems to be the main point.
So, apart from the bastard Elder McCarthy, it seems like everybody got what they wanted.
Yes, and yeah, it's another one where the murderer feels sympathetic again, and also the murderer just happily when they said the jig is up goes, "All right, I'll tell you every single detail."
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
this is turning into something of a trope with this series.
yeah, yeah. I imagine it was not unique to Arthur Conan Doyle, but it's probably sort of a trope of the time. And then again, it's also a bit of a trope nowadays in the crime procedurals, because they will, when they've been revealed that there is a mountain of evidence, they do sort of give some details that are not there. Or when they think there's a mountain of evidence, they just give up and spend, say, important things that incriminate them on tape.
Yeah.
So I suppose this is the equivalent of that trope.
Yeah.
You know, but, yes, I like the story.
Probably the
It's
most
perhaps
complete story we read this week.
yeah, it's it's a bit simpler than some of the others.
Yeah.
It's sort of like about 2/3 of the way through. If you haven't figured out who the murderer is, have you been paying attention?
Yeah, that
Because
is a
every
valid question.
yeah, and granted, you can't work out every bit of the motive, which is he was a highwayman,
Yeah.
and before, and he's essentially being blackmailed and threatened with the fact that Britain is a very law-abiding country, like hell. Even then, like hell.
Yeah.
You
Uh,
but yes, it's got this dusting of sort of illegitimacy to it.
yeah. Uh, yeah,
Yeah,
I enjoyed this one. It was kind of well, it I say well as if I didn't really like it. No, I did. It's just I don't see this as being one of the particularly memorable ones.
no, I'll be honest. Of the three, and as I said at the beginning, we both think that there's one that's sort of a non-story, and we don't agree on it. But this one, we both agree is a story. But this is the one I remember the least about, as sort of its general plot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's is just sort of how you look at it. And yeah, it's also probably a slightly simpler one. On though I will say in the next one, there's one that, due to the modern day, sort of one of the hints is a lot more obvious in the modern day than it may have been at the time. We will get to that in the next one.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's a good story. I've seen there's probably dozens of variants of this one, and not just Sherlock Holmes, because it's essentially a motive as old as time: money, land, wealth, power, etc., etc. So the basic premise and structure is probably the most adapted of the ones we've read so far.
Yeah.
Is that is that maybe the study in Scarlet of Vengeance?
uh,
So again, another sympathetic killer, but not quite as sympathetic as what was it? I was about to say Jebediah Hope, but
Jefferson
Jebediah is
Hope.
Jefferson Hope. Yeah, Jebediah is the Simpsons founder of Springfield.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, it was but it was still good.
Yeah. It was a perfectly functional Adventure of the Week story.
Yeah. TV highlight of the week.
TV highlight of the week. I actually the text you see on the um above the fireplace was originally just gonna say book of the week and a picture of whatever we were reading, but well, A, that just makes me think of TV verb, and B, we're gonna be on the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes for the next 2 weeks. So,
Yeah.
book of the week is probably not accurate.
Yes.
Sherlock
And
Holmes
this,
book of the week.
murder mystery of the week.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves to one genre.
Yeah. Yeah. But yes, that was the Boscombe Valley mystery. I was about to say, I've totally forgotten the name of it, and then it came to mind.
Yeah. And
So next,
the next one, this is the one
sorry,
I thought was the bit of a non-story. Although I have since gone through it again, and I don't know that I still think that, but also, it is, I think, kind of anticlimactic. And by
yeah,
Watson's own admission as well.
yeah,
This is
I would agree with that. It's anticlimactic, but I wouldn't say it's a non-story, and it feeds into sort of a reality of sort of crime, much more so than the nature of sort of mystery novels with super detectives. It's in a la Sherlock Holmes, Ludwig, the Thursday Murder Club by Richard
yeah.
Osmond and stuff like that.
I
But
don't really want to make a habit of just reading out vast swathes of the text, but I think I am gonna start with the introduction for this one because well, Watson basically lays it out here. He says, "When I glance over my notes and records of the Sherlock Holmes cases between the years 82 and 90, I am faced by so many which present strange and interesting features that it is no easy matter to know which to choose and which to leave. Some, however, have already gained publicity through the papers, and others have not offered a field for those peculiar qualities which my friend possesses in so high a degree, and which it is the object of these papers to illustrate. Some, too, have baffled his analytical skill, and would be as narratives beginnings without an ending, while others have been but partially cleared up, and their explanations founded upon rather upon conjecture and surmise than on that absolute logical proof which is so dear to him. There is, however, one of these last which was so remarkable in its details and so startling in its results that I am tempted to give some account of it in spite of the fact that there are points in connection with it which never have been and probably never will be entirely cleared up." And as a framing device, I quite like that. It's
yeah,
like he's admitting up front, okay, we don't have all the details for this one, but it's a very, but I can't really not mention it.
yes,
Yeah. So he's setting us up for disappointment early on. Well, disappointment for lack of a better term. He's letting us know that not everything was cleared up, but also that this was such a story that it's worth reading anyway. Because
yes,
the framing device of Sherlock Holmes is that it's Watson's journal, and Watson being the point of view character through whom we experience Holmes and have him explain all of his deductive reasoning to. Yeah.
yeah. The next paragraph is basically Watson listing a load of cases that might actually have been more satisfying to read about than the 5 orange pips, because they have a conclusion
Yeah.
and to them. But he decides on this one, and fair enough. And it is a late September day, and we once again return to 221B Baker Street for this
Indeed.
story, frankly. And as is the image of Britain, it is raining
Well,
heavily.
naturally.
Yeah. We were forced to raise our minds from the routine of life and recognize the presence of those great elemental forces which shriek at mankind through the bars of his civilization, like untamed beasts in a cage.
Uh,
Translation: It's raining a lot, even by Britain's standards.
uh,
Yes, at this point, the Welsh have had to put on a second cagoule. Yeah. So Watson has come to Baker Street and is staying for a few days because his wife is away visiting her mother. So he thought, you know what, Lads Week. And by that he means moving back into his old rooms temporarily and sitting inside smoking because the weather is awful.
Yeah. Although the awful
And
weather does serve to immediately impress upon Holmes the seriousness with which their guest. Basically, he wouldn't have come out if it wasn't urgent.
yeah, and Watson goes on the first. Goes, who could come to tonight? Some friend of yours, perhaps? And Holmes is like, except yourself, I have none. I do not encourage visitors. Which, okay, this is a bit on the Holmes as an antisocial character stereotype, along with his general rudeness to any detective. But with a lot of people, he is perfectly polite and kind. He seems to understand the social niceties and indeed seems to actually believe them. And to
Yeah,
an
he
extent, I
does.
imagine he would be quite offended if someone actually ignored them with him.
Yeah. And there's also the fact that
Yeah.
he wouldn't be doing what he does if he didn't want to help people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he says if it's a client, it's a serious case. Nothing less would bring a man out on such a day and at such an hour.
But then he makes not a deduction, but a guess. But I take it that it is more likely to be some crony of the landlady's. And he was wrong! Yet a moment of Sherlock Holmes being wrong.
Yeah. And what was his name? What was John Openshaw, that was the name.
Yeah.
So John Openshaw enters the flat, and obviously he's like, Holmes takes his coat and his umbrella, and sits him up to hear his to hear his story, and he says, "I heard Sherlock Holmes has never been beaten," and he corrects him on that point. Says, "I've been beaten 4 times, 3 times by men and once by a woman."
But what is that compared with the number of your successes?
It is true that I have been generally successful. That's
And you may be so with me.
and so Holmes hears his story, and it's quite a story about his uncle Elias, who immigrated to America, Florida specifically, and did pretty well for himself, but he moved back, and I don't quite know how to articulate his reasoning for moving back.
He moved back in response to the American government passing emancipation, basically.
Yes. Uh,
Yeah.
it's a former. Well, it will become apparent. He receives a letter, and
Yeah.
five.
The line.
Sorry.
Yeah. The line in question that describes his reasoning. His reason for leaving them was his aversion to the Negroes. That tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah. And so he gets a letter from India, and five dried orange pips fall out of the letter, and the letters K, and the only thing written in the letter are the letters KKK.
Yeah.
Uh,
And in response to this, he shrieks, my God, my sins have overtaken me."
so the clan has marked him for death, basically.
Yeah, but at this point, it's sort of like, and this is the bit where it's sort of like made to change due to just sort of the media of today and the information getting out. The KKK was probably not as well known to the average English reader
Yeah.
in the teen 80s and 1890s as
Indeed,
it is.
Watson has never heard of them in this story, which gives Holmes the excuse to explain who the Ku Klux Klan are to the reader.
Yes, they are a secret society in this. I don't think I've ever heard them called that in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Although I didn't know that the origin of the name was meant to be onomatopoeic of
yeah,
the sound loading and cocking a rifle makes.
yeah. That I didn't know. That's a disturbing thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. In response to the letter, because the client has grew up with the uncle because the uncle took a liking to him and persuaded his brother to let essentially him raise his nephew. Who the uncle, in response to the letter, goes into the one room which he denied his nephew access to and denied the key to, and comes out with a box, and he is sent for his lawyer, and uh, the lawyer comes, and they're both summoned to his room, and the fire is full of burning paper, basically.
Yeah. He's
And
destroying
upon the
the
lid was
evidence.
yeah, and upon the box from which the papers would be taken was printed the treble K, as they put it,
Yeah.
and gets John to serve as witness to the changing of the man's will, which leaves everything to his brother, John's father, where it will then, no doubt, pass to John later.
That's John Openshaw, not John Watson.
Yes. Yeah. If you can enjoy it in peace, well and good. If you cannot, if you find you cannot, take my advice, my boy, and leave it to your deadliest enemy. I am so sorry to give you such a two-edged thing, but I can't say what turn things are going to take. Kindly sign the paper where Mr. Fordham shows you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so he does inherit. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself there. There come times where the father gets a little drunk and ranty.
The uncle.
The uncle. Sorry.
Yeah.
There comes times he gets a little drunk and ranty, gets fed up with being cooped up at home and being scared of people who he knows are out to kill him. And he would go outside, let off some steam, and come back. Except one day he doesn't come back.
And is instead found in a pond, and a green scummed pond, and at the foot of the garden.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the jury turns back a verdict of suicide, knowing of his eccentricity. Translation: nobody liked him.
Yeah.
Nobody liked him. We're going to let his murderer off.
And
Yeah.
all's well and good until very recently when John Openshaw received a similar letter with the 5 orange pips and the KKK.
You've missed a bit again.
Oh, have I?
Yeah, there was a difference of 7 weeks between the letter and the death. And the estate and all the money, a value of some £14,000, is transferred to John's father. And they found the box with KKK on it, and from an examination of the law, and found a paper label on it that repeated KKK and had, in addition, letters, memoranda, receipts, and a register, indicating the nature of the papers destroyed by it. And there was nothing else of importance up there. They fought. Indeed, just some papers, notebooks, and bearing upon the uncle's life. And from his time as a soldier in the Confederate Army. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the father had taken to living there as well, and in January of '85, the father had gave a sharp cry of supply at the breakfast table, but he had also received an envelope with 5 dried orange pips. Because he had laughed it off because he didn't believe, because it seemed so overly dramatic
Yeah.
to do such a thing. But he was scared and puzzled by it happening now. The inside of the envelope also had KKK written in it. And there was a letter inside, a small note that just said, "Put the papers on the sundial," which of course confused them. Though there was a sundial in the garden. Well, I say confused them. For a moment, it confused them. There's a sundial in the garden, and they must have assumed that the papers were the ones that had been destroyed. Because the father was like, "Pooh! We are in a civilized land here. We can't have tomfoolery of this kind. Where does the thing come from?" And it came from Dundee this time. A preposterous practical joke. What have I to do with sundials and papers? I shall take no notice of such nonsense. The father forbids the son from contacting the police on the matter.
Yeah, because he knows they're not going to help, and at best he'd just be laughed at.
Yeah.
So the KKK are clearly after these papers, which no longer exist.
Yeah. And 3 days after, the father goes to visit a friend, Major Freebody, he's called. And while he's on the second day of his father being away, he receives a telegram from the major imploring him to come at once, for his father had fallen into one of the deep chalk pits which abound in the neighbourhood. He was lying senseless with a shattered skull. Oh, and he passed away without ever recovering consciousness. So a second mysterious accident after a number of orange pips arrived in the post.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we come to the reason he's come to Sherlock Holmes for help is that he has received the letter with the orange pips.
Yeah. Yeah. This was nearly the best part of 3 years ago this happened. And because this was taking place in Watson's notes of 87. And September 87. And he's been living happily, and he's thought the curse had gone. But an envelope with, you guess it, 5 orange pips and KKK written on it has arrived with a letter saying put the papers on the sundial again. And he hasn't done anything about it, and has he hasn't put any papers on the sundial, and he has come to Holmes for advice on the recommendation of a Colonel Pendergast, I believe the man's name was.
Yeah, I seem to remember a Colonel Pendergast.
Yeah. And Sherlock, "Tut tut," he cried. "You must act, man, or you are lost. Nothing but energy can save you. This is no time for despair."
Tut tut seems kind of
yes.
flippant for the situation.
How British though is it to go tutting at this?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He had gone to the police, and the police were basically just sort of wash their hands of it, to sort of like didn't believe him. And Sherlock goes, "Incredible imbecility."
Yeah.
Imbecility. Yeah.
So, Sherlock tells him to put a note in the box saying the papers were burned and put that on the sundial.
Yeah. There is one page that he found that had escaped the burning. It had fluttered to under his uncle's bed when he was burning the papers, and he found it when he moved it. When he took ownership, which is just sort of like, wow, over two and a bit years without anyone finding this thing from under the bed.
Yeah. Do we find out what these papers are?
Yes. These papers are basically the evidence of the actions of the clan.
Oh, yeah.
Like people they went after and stuff like this. So Holmes orders him to do this, to get home immediately, taking the last train, and get it out, and that. He has been granted a policeman to stay at his house, but is only stay at the house. He hasn't come to London with him or anything. So yeah. So the man hurries to the man hurries to go, and it's just all like Sherlock saying it's busy, so you should be safe. Essentially, the man admits he's armed, and Sherlock's like, "That is well. Tomorrow I shall set to work upon your case. I shall see you in Horsham then." No, your secret lies in London. It is there that I shall seek it. Because the latest letter, which arrived 2 days ago, is postmarked London. And so, Watson comments, of all our cases, none, and that we have had has been no more fantastic than this. Save perhaps the sign of the fall. Replies Sherlock.
But then who? Well, yes, say perhaps that, and yet this John Openshaw seems to be walking amid even greater perils than did the Shelters. And then Watson asked, who is this KKK, and why does he pursue this unhappy family?
Yeah. Yeah. And at this point, we get another sort of description of Sherlock's system of filing and cataloguing useful information before he pulls down
an American
we don't
encyclopedia.
Yeah. Now we'd consider something we may have assumed a working hypothesis. That's clear. Yeah. He goes on to sort of point out to solve why the letters are coming in different ways, and there's different times between the crimes because they were coming by boats, but the first one came a lot quicker. The boat with the letter, in the case of the first one, came a lot quicker than the boat with the people. Hence why it went from 7 weeks to 3 days.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'll get to that. He explains who the Ku Klux Klan are to Watson, who has never heard of them, as mentioned. But we never see John Openshaw again, because the paper a few days later details that he's met with an accident and is dead.
Yes, he is. He seems to have apparently stepped off of the end of essentially a minor pier on the Thames, and that a boat would lash itself to because of the darkness and the slippery conditions.
Yeah.
And this sends Sherlock into somewhat of a rage.
Yeah.
He is very angry at this.
And he freely admits it hurts his pride.
Yeah. His next bit is, it is a petty feeling, no doubt, but it hurts my pride. It shall become a personal matter with me now, and if God sends me help, I shall set my hand upon this gang. That he should come to me for help, and that I should send him away to his death. Yeah.
Yeah.
They must be cunning devils. How could they have decoyed him down there? The embankment is not on the direct line to the station. The bridge, no doubt, was too crowded, even on such a night, for their purpose.
Yeah.
And he goes out, and Watson goes, to the police? No, I shall be my own police, when I have spun the web that they may take the flies, but not before. Yes, as Watson then spends the day engaged in his work, actually doing his job
as a medical professional.
Yeah, and
which of course is completely glossed over.
Yeah, it is nearly 10 in the evening when Sherlock returns, pale and worn. And he is rather rudely eating bread, tearing a chunk off of a loaf that just happens to be lying there on the sideboard.
Not having
because
eaten anything.
Yeah, he's forgotten. And yeah, but he has found a clue who but before he explains, he go he takes an orange from the cupboard, tears it to pieces, and then squeezes out the pips upon the table. So he takes 5 and put them into an envelope.
Yep.
On the inner flap, he writes SH for JO. That is not 4 as in the number, but it is the word spelt out. Now, Arthur Conan Doyle was not ahead on text speak quite that much.
No.
He addresses it to a Captain James Calhoun, barge Lone Star, Savannah, Georgia. And then he goes on to explain that there are 3 on the Lone Star, which he caught his eye because he knows there is a connection to the US with something called the Lone Star in one of the states, and it is, of course, Texas, the Lone Star state. But he can't remember which one, obviously, so Watson fills in that information. And he learns that this ship had travelled on the dates to the locations where the murders took place, or close enough to be feasible to get there, and that there are only 3 Americans on board it. Most of them are Europeans. And he concludes that the 3 of them are the gang that has been committing the murders. And he sends this letter so that they will get it when they return to port it in Georgia, and it should give them a sleepless night before the officials in America whom he has informed, because the clan has essentially been disbanded and is illegal, but its members are still semi-active.
Yeah.
So
of course, the guy never receives the letter with the orange pips. And we find a few years later that the barge of the Lone Star has been discovered, the ship apparently having been destroyed in a storm at around this time, which is why I thought this was... and that's the end of the story, which I thought was quite anticlimactic, really.
Yeah, so
I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that.
Yeah, I get anticlimactic, but I do believe it's sort of not a non-story because of that. Because, again, a sad reality of life is that most crimes are not prosecuted, and indeed most criminals are not found.
Yeah.
And so it has a reality that, as I say, a lot of crime procedurals and crime novels, or short stories, as this is, don't represent, because, of course, it's not good reading to have your detective fail to get his man.
Yeah. And of course, it opens up with Watson admitting this and saying, like, I generally only take down the stories that have satisfying endings because that's not good reading.
Yeah. But it was the peculiarities of this case.
Yeah.
And though there is arguably still a bit of a cop-out as to sort of the readers and the sense of justice, because they are dead. The 3 men are believed to be dead, because it's sort of like a bit of the prow of the ship was discovered, and it's just sort of like normally when the prow breaks off a ship, there's a lot of flooding very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, the prow is attached to the keel, which is basically the thing that everything else on the ship is attached to.
If there's a hole in the keel, you're in serious problems.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, it's very much implied that it's gone. There is an air of mystery still about it as well, because there is the chance that they managed to get off and they got onto another ship if a life raft got to them. But given the implied bad weather in London, would suggest that there has been bad weather uh, in the seas nearby of Europe.
Yeah.
Um, who knows? Basically, it is indeed the point of the story. He,
Yeah. And we then come to the man with the twisted lip, which is again
yes, which,
something. I mean, I don't really have much to say about this one. Uh,
yeah, this one I think can actually probably be summed up in about 5 lines.
yeah,
Every
let's just do that. They are told someone is dead. The wife does not believe that the person is dead because she received a letter very recently, and a although part of this story, I will just say, was adapted in the BBC Sherlock series. If you remember the Crack Den episode.
yes, uh, because at the start of it, essentially, one of Mary's friends has come over saying their husband is still at a den and they can't get him. Can you rescue him? And
Although this
Watson
one is a lot
goes,
more funny because Watson does go, and he's like, "Oh, what day is it? I've only been here a few hours. Surely it's been days, man."
It's been 2 days, man. Your wife is worried sick. And when when Holmes is navigating this man out, he gets a tug at his coat edge, coattail. That's it, and a whispered comment of "Take 2 more steps and then look back at me." And what appeared to be an old man smoking and staring into the fire is revealed to be Sherlock Holmes in disguise because he is working a case.
Yeah.
Because the a man whose wife believes him to be dead, Ed, was spotted in the floors above, uh, and the proprietor wouldn't let her up, and she returned with a police officer shortly thereafter because he seemed to be signalling to her to get here, and there was trouble. And the only person they found up there is a noted sort of local beggar, uh, red-headed, grimy, has got sort of the hunch, the limp, and a scar that leads to his upturned lip.
Yeah.
And so
Hugh Boone was the name of the beggar.
yeah, so Holmes has been
Which huge Boone. It's not a very subtle.
but Holmes is investigating and has revealed the reason he's in disguise is because the owners don't like him because he's conducted. Essentially, it sounds like he caused a police raid to happen to arrest a killer on this place, and also that this building has regularly had people killed in it and just dropped into the river through a hatch in the floor.
Yeah.
Or, and indeed, the man's coat is found in the river when it goes to low tide. And it's found at the bottom in the mud with pockets full of pennies and halfpennies.
Huh.
He's to weigh it down. And yeah, the man in question, Hugh
Boone.
has been, yeah, Boone, even Hugh Boone, has been arrested for the murder because they also found the rest of the man's clothes and his watch there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if you're thinking outside the box, you've probably already figured out how this is possible.
Yeah, that Holmes goes when the wife when he goes to give a quick update to the wife with Watson. you get Watson sent a note back with the addled, with the addict, who he sent to his house where both of their wives are, and he sent a note to explain what's going on to Mary. That he won't be back, and he's just sort of like probably like, ugh. This is all late at night, by the way.
Yeah.
So he goes with Holmes, who is staying at the house of the supposed murder victim. Yeah, being put up by the wife. She asks him to be truthful with her. Does he think that her husband's dead? Yes. When does he think that he was killed? It would have been the Monday when you saw him. And she then reveals that she got a letter that day with his signet ring that was
Definitely written in his hand.
in his hand, is quick writing hand. So when you're in a hurry, and that it has been posted then, so he must still surely be alive. It is pointed out he could have written it before, and it's only just arrived.
Yeah.
So she acknowledges that's the case, but doesn't believe it. Holmes, Watson goes to sleep because Holmes's room has two beds. Holmes makes essentially a divan on the floor out of cushions and smokes a pile of shag tobacco over the evening and isn't thinking about it. But it leads to an absolutely wonderful thing. Where is it?
Are you talking about the closing line?
No, not the closing line. It's like, so he sat as I dropped off to sleep, and so he sat when a sudden ejaculation caused me to wake up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I had as Holmes has finally hit upon what is going on.
Oh, archaic language.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah. If that line appeared in a modern book, it would have been, oh dear. What a dream you had, Mr. Watson. Or Dr. Watson, even.
yeah.
And Holmes does not apologise for waking Watson. He just inquires, as in, awake, Watson? Yes. Game for a morning drive? Certainly. Then dress. No one is stirring yet, but I know that's where the stable boy sleeps, and we shall soon have the trap out. Watson then checks the time. It's not even 4:30 in the morning yet.
Ah.
Yeah, and they then head to Holmes is then bringing a bag along, and it says he has found the key to the case in the bathroom. Watson doesn't entirely know what to make of this, but they make their way to the prison where Hugh is being imprisoned for the moment.
And they give him a little sleepy sponge bath.
Yeah, on the face, having learnt that the prisoner has refused to wash, but anything except his hands, and Holmes basically sponges his face and reveals, behold, Charles St. Clair.
The murderer is the victim.
Yeah.
Wait, that's... And then there's a whole snafu. It's like, as I am the victim, I cannot possibly be my murderer, and I'm being detained illegally.
Yeah. And there's it's revealed why he's doing this, and it turns out he was once a journalist who then was tasked with doing pieces on the London homeless scene.
Yeah.
So he went in disguise in the homeless scene and got good at makeup.
Yeah. Well, he's an actor. I think.
He had been an actor and then went into journalism.
Yeah.
That's where he got the makeup. Yeah, that's a much clearer way of saying it than the way I was.
Yeah.
So he used that to get the disguise, and he found that he was making so much more money being homeless with a good spot and a quick wit
And
than he was as
the
journalism.
disfigurement makeup for sympathy.
Yeah, yeah. They found he was making so much money. They threw in journalism and went and just was a full-time beggar.
Of course, he never told his wife this, which is why he panicked when he saw her and disappeared.
Yeah, indeed, he was doing this before he met his wife. That's how much he was making off of this. So he got married afterwards. His wife thinks he's just in business. Yes, so he rented out the rooms for a share of the amount of money he made, and he made an average of It seemed he said it's a very bad day when he didn't make £2 a day. In which we need that calculator out again for how much is £2 a day nowadays.
On it.
Yeah.
So, what's the
Yeah.
year on this?
Uh,
1890, would you say?
1890 when it was ostensibly published, so I'd say 1888, assuming it's the year after the last story.
£2 in 1888 would be £220.31 today.
Yeah. Imagine making that every day by begging. You would throw in your job. And also act as if you're doing something respectable, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was his makeup work, his quick wit, and his good location allowed him to essentially outperform any other job he'd ever done.
Yeah.
And
But I find
Neville
this
Saint
character very distasteful because, you know, there were a lot of actual homeless people who could really have used that money that they now can't because
yeah,
you know.
yeah. This man has decided it's easier than doing his work, and he's living comfortably.
Yeah. So I find this. This is probably like less sympathetic than any given murderer we've had so far. To me.
Yeah, I don't think of him so much as a sympathetic character. I think this is being played a bit more for laughs. The situation, unfortunately, because the man is let free, and a deal is made that will keep the information out of the courts and save him embarrassment. Because
basically, he has to give up begging.
Yeah, he has to give up begging, and if he's ever caught again doing it, all this information will come out, and yeah. So
which he doesn't want because he doesn't want his wife and kids to know about it.
Yes. So Holmes and Watson finish up with the case. There's and then it ends with the line that Ollie seemed to quite like. So, would you like to read the final line for our viewers?
Mr. Holmes, we're very much indebted to you for having cleared that up. I wish I knew how you reached your results. I reached this one, said my friend, by sitting upon 5 pillows and consuming an ounce of shag. I think, Watson, that if we drive to Baker Street, we shall be just in time for breakfast.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just sort of like, yes, this is how this thing.
This is a full ounce problem.
Yes. An ounce of shag tobacco. That room. I'm amazed that Watson was able to tell that it was actually day in that room because just the amount of smoke coming off of that. I would have thought it would have been a full-on London smog situation inside that bed.
Uh, so yeah, that
Yeah,
was the man with the twisted lip. Yeah,
yeah,
it was fine. It was an enjoyable little distraction.
yeah. This is the one I consider a bit of a non-story
It kind of is a bit of a non-story. Yeah,
because there's no crime, and it is literally due to the man's vanity and sense of embarrassment that there is a perception of a crime.
yeah. I mean, it's
And
all just a red herring.
yeah, but again, at the time it was produced, something like this could have been quite the twist, and maybe even seen as scandalous because this well-to-do man disguising himself as a homeless person to make money.
Yeah,
I also feel it also goes into the narrative that is used by a lot of people to justify dislike and cruelty of policy towards the homeless, is that they're all secretly richer than they are and they choose to do this rather than do honest work.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why I find this character distasteful, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, it's just not good,
Yeah,
that one, and I think it's. I'm going to be honest. I'm reasonably sure the stereotype is sort of the homeless are choosing to be homeless, as that was stated within the last couple of years by a government minister.
yes.
That's their
Lifestyle
belief.
choice was what was
Yes,
said, I believe.
yeah. I think the stereotype has basically been there since homelessness in civilization has been a thing.
Yeah,
And this is one of the more overt pieces of literature I have ever seen it, or one of the pieces of literature where it is most overtly represented. That attitude.
yeah. And I guess for as long as there have been people down on their luck, there have been people suspicious of them because they can't like really conceive that some
Yeah,
well, like we all intellectually know that some others have it worse than us, but like knowing something and believing it are different things, and I think that is in part where this comes from. Like
yeah,
because people can't imagine what it's like to be homeless, it's difficult to fully believe that that is the actual situation.
yeah, yeah, and
And I mean that's nobody's fault, but it does sort of leave people open to. I mean, it's quite insidious, really, how these suspicions can sort of sneak up on you, and when they're represented uh, in popular culture in this way. I mean, it's played for a joke in a lot of. I've seen. I can't remember them specifically, but I've seen comedies where, as a visual gag, you'll see a homeless person get into a sports car.
yes, yes. I had someone I went to school with. I think claimed to have seen someone who was begging get up and get into a car on in real life, and it's just
Because if you
like
were trying to project an image of being desperately poor, you'd keep a sports car around the corner.
yeah, yeah. Like as I will admit, there's one person I know who is no longer on the streets because things have got better for them, which is good to see.
Oh, hooray.
Good to see. But there's also plenty of people who I'm now seeing on the streets who I've never seen before. So it is unfortunately as still as much of, or probably a lot more of a problem than it was at the time.
Yeah.
I'm,
Yeah.
I'm so
I mean, as I said,
yeah,
Arthur Conan Doyle wrote this in like the 1890s. I don't think we can hold him responsible for. I mean, I don't even think he would have started the trope.
no. Well, that's what I was saying. The trope has been around as long as there's been civilization and wealth. So
Yeah.
Oh, if from the looks of it, so the trope predates the Bible. So,
Yeah,
and
like
indeed, the trope sort of appears in the Bible to an extent, and can sort of be used as the basis of of some of the lessons in the Bible.
and he was probably just thinking, what would make a good plot twist. I don't think we
Yeah,
can really blame the author for that.
yeah, no, it's sort of like the story is distasteful, but it's not necessarily the distaste is what he was going for. There's also not necessarily evidence to suggest that he actually believed that this is what's happened, and that is his opinion of the situation.
Yeah,
He could, or there is also on the flip side, he could be trying to portray these people as sort of scum. Granted, if they'd faced any criminal charges, that argument would have a lot more going for it.
yeah. No, I think
But
this was written, like, in terms of intent, I think, well, the intent was innocent enough. It's just unfortunate that it happens upon, well, what has become with time, uh, well, a more distasteful stereotype.
yeah, of the rich poor person, as it were.
Yeah,
Probably the nicest way of putting it.
yeah. And doesn't take away from how well the story is told,
Yeah,
but
no, like on the technical level, the story is it's fine. There's nothing really wrong with it. There's a couple of humorous lines. One of which one of which is definitely because of how language has evolved, and the other because it isn't the worst closing line we've had in a Sherlock Holmes story.
yeah, an
Yeah,
ounce of shag.
that would be that would be an interesting thing to do. Talk of what is the worst closing line in a Sherlock Holmes story.
Oh,
Yeah,
we'll have to.
that, we'll
Yeah,
have to get through more of them before we
yeah.
can do that.
We'll have to keep some of our least favourites in mind for when we get to the end of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, and sort of also least favorite stories and stuff like that.
Yeah,
As we will be, in theory, doing with Assassin's Creed after Assassin's Creed Shadows. We will be talking about our favorite games, who
yeah.
we think is the best character in terms
So
of relating. Who we
when that will be
think,
will depend on when I can happen upon a copy of the game without giving any money to Ubisoft.
yes, that is the major question. And but yeah, yeah.
Uh, so
Well, you might not be giving any money to Ubisoft because it might just collapse of its own accord while the game is still at full price. Just, please note, the game officially launches in 2 hours.
oh, I
Yeah, because
wasn't
it's the
consciously
19th
aware of
today.
that.
Yeah, it's the 19th today, and it comes out on the 20th.
Uh, well, yeah, I think that's about all we got to say about the man with the twisted lip. So join us
Yes,
next week. We'll be talking about the adventure of the blue carbuncle, the adventure of the speckled band, and the adventure of the engineer's thumb.
I'll be from the titles. Which one grabs your interest most?
Uh, engineer's thumb, I think would be.
I'm yeah, I'm on the blue carbuncle.
Yeah, well, that's
So
the next one.
yeah, so naturally the speckled band is going to be the one we like most out of it.
Possibly. Uh,
Yeah.
anyway, thanks for listening, everyone who did. If you're listening to this in the future, hello there. Join us,
Uh,
well, next week for
yeah.
those three. You can also watch us play Middle Earth Shadow of Mordor on this Twitch channel and the Ollie Johnson Plays YouTube channel on Sunday nights. I've still got
No,
to
this
do
week,
that one thing.
Though this week there is possibly a bonus stream tomorrow to make up for the two last streams being shorter.
Yeah. We will see how things go there. It'll depend
Yeah,
entirely on how I feel tomorrow, I expect.
yeah,
uh,
and then
oh,
we
I
have
don't have a Saturday stream lined up yet, but I will do in time for Saturday.
yeah,
Uh,
and then if you miss us between Sunday and Wednesday, we both take part in a D&D campaign, which is currently Goblins versus Strahd, which has one more session in it.
yes, so tune in to
And
twitch.tv/eclectichawk on Tuesday night for the finale, we mean it this time, of Goblins vs. Strahd. The combat ran long, so we've got one more.
yeah, yeah, where absolute chaos has happened. As I stated at the beginning, I nearly died. Borkle was. I nearly died going to save you, Borkle.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and you got out of it scot free. Really, really, quite a different way from how you started the campaign, and with 3 lots of death saves by the end of the second session.
Yes, this is true. Uh,
Yeah,
well, hopefully we'll see you all for some of that. Thank you for joining us. Thanks, Dan, for going through these with me. This is fun. This is always fun. And
yes, it is.
we will. Well, we'll see you next time. Good night, everybody.